me now a panel of representatives: Congresswoman Judy Chu, chair of the Asian Pacific American Caucus; Congressman Sharice Davids of Kansas, who's a member of the Native American Caucus; Congressman Raul Ruiz, chair of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus; and Congresswoman Joyce Beatty, chair of the Congressional Black Caucus. Ladies and gentlemen, look at your screen. Those folks represent the rising majority of America. This is what America looks like. So happy to have all of you guys with me. Congresswoman Beatty, I do want to start with you. Well, you just heard your former colleague, Cedric Richmond, talk about this agenda. Collectively, this screen you see controls a lot of members of Congress. You can help push legislation. You can also help stop it. Do you think that this agenda that Biden has put forth has a good chance of passing Congress? And what role will you all play in making sure it does?
I absolutely think that we have the ability to pass his agenda. Much of it has come from what we've been advocating for a long time. As Congressman, now Senior Advisor Cedric Richmond said, Democrats care about the American people. As the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, we will be very active. We will be coming into the 117th Congress with 60 members strong. So when we talk about our platform, we also have a strong relationship with my colleagues here today, the Tri-Caucus. We will be supportive of the $2,000 increase for citizens. That came out of the Democratic Caucus, came out of the Congressional Black Caucus advocating for it. When you talk about housing and you talk about SNAP and you talk about moratoriums on mortgages and you talk about not having people evicted, we also know that there are disparities. COVID-19 has to be a top priority. Black folks make up 13% of the national population, yet when you look at the death rates, we're in much higher numbers there. And I could go down the list. The same for economic development, minority businesses. 41% of Black businesses are in trouble because of the economic, and certainly we all know what the injustices are. We've witnessed some of that in the last week with the attack on our democracy. So we will stand with President-elect, soon-to-be President Biden, and Vice President-elect Kamala Harris, who is a member of the Congressional Black Caucus and has been very active with us.
Congresswoman Davids, I want to turn to you. As I was preparing for this interview, I did talk to some folks on the Hill about you specifically. And some of the feedback I got is it's not just your presence on Capitol Hill. It's how you challenge conviction. It's how you think. It's how you reshape how we view Native American policy in this country. So I'm very happy to have you make your debut on the show. You're preceded by a stellar reputation on the Hill. And I want to ask you how this agenda will help inform policy on Native American communities, specifically as everything feels so urgent. You know, we had the violent insurrection on Capitol Hill. We have a global plague that we're trying to deal with. We have people suffering, getting kicked out of their homes. The Native American community is certainly being disproportionately impacted by this. How do you see this addressing some of those challenges?
Well, I'm glad to be here. I'm particularly glad to be here with my colleagues today who have, I just want to make sure that everybody knows that the Tri-Caucus, currently Tri-Caucus +2, although Deb Haaland is our nominee for the Department of Interior. We're all very proud of her. But the colleagues that I get to join here today have really helped make sure that at no point have Natives been left out of the conversation. And I think so often, as somebody who is used to being the only Native person in the room, it warms my heart to know that not just my colleagues in the House, my Democratic colleagues in the House, but also that President-elect Biden and Vice President-elect Kamala Harris have really put at the forefront this idea of making sure that we are at the table, having the conversations that are going to raise awareness about the invisibility of Native populations, but also the horribly underfunded Indian Health Service, the inability to get vaccinations to the places that they need to go. And part of the strength of what's happening here today, not just in this conversations, but the conversations that are going to go forward, is that we recognize that we are all connected in this and that we have got to support each other in making sure that marginalized communities and traditionally underserved communities are included and that they are thought about and that we approach this with an equitable lens.
Yeah, something that Congresswoman Deb Haaland, as you mentioned, she's Biden's nominee to lead the Department of Interior. Something that folks on on Capitol Hill said that she says, it doesn't matter where you flew here from. You flew over native land, no matter where you came from. So seeing her lead the Department of Interior will certainly set, I think, a new course on how the administration engages with the Native American community, as I said, who is disproportionately impacted by a lot of challenges in the country. Congresswoman Judy Chu, I do want to turn to you. Congratulations on being reelected chair of the CAPAC, the Congressional Asian Pacific Islander Caucus on Capitol Hill. Look, I know that there's been a lot of discord in the API community about the lack of representation in this administration. There is no person of Asian American descent who is leading a federal agency. So how can the administration make good on that? I mean, is it from a policy perspective, from a staff diversity perspective in terms of senior staff? What do you say to this administration, particularly if your former colleague Cedric Richmond is still watching the show?
Well, we were very disappointed that there was not an API appointed as a cabinet secretary when we've had a cabinet secretary in both Democratic and Republican administrations for the last 20 years. However, I do have to say I was very, very grateful and heartened because we got support from the Tri-Caucus +2. And together, we issued a letter saying that this needs to be done. And that kind of support makes a huge difference. Nonetheless, we are continuing with our efforts to make this administration representative of all people, including AAPIs, Asian Americans, because we deserve to have a seat at the table where these decisions are being made. So we will continue our efforts. In the meanwhile, we are so heartened, though, that the Biden American Rescue Plan will, in fact, address communities of color. We have been waiting for this for a long time. He has $1 billion for community outreach for the vaccine. And for our communities, the API community, which is linguistically and culturally sometimes isolated, it is so important to have that outreach if we're going to make sure that all of America is vaccinated.
Yeah, and we've got to start disaggregating data when it comes to the Asian American community as well. It's the fastest growing demographic in the country and represents more than 20 million people in this country. So very happy to have you weigh in there. Congressman Ruiz, you're an old regular at this point. You're back on the show again, and thank you so much for being here as chair of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus. I do want to ask you, because something that I feel like has fallen off the radar, which absolutely should not, is the nearly 600 orphan children that the Trump administration had played a heavy hand in. There are still children who, because of the family separation policy, are still out there. I'm curious, have you had any conversation with the Biden administration about how that problem will be addressed and other issues that you'd like to see this administration address as it relates to the Hispanic community?
Well, we just saw the Office of Inspector General release a report clearly demonstrating that the separation of children was a new policy under the zero tolerance policy under President Trump, and that they intentionally used that trauma to children in order to cause punishment, harm, and as a way to deter other migrants from coming in. I believe that is a crime against humanity, and I will continue those conversations to see how we can charge all of them, because all of their hands are guilty for that, including those who recently stepped away from the administration after the January 6th attack, but they stayed with the administration when they were causing lifelong mental torture for these children for the rest of their lives. The Congressional Hispanic Caucus have really led the way to make sure that we push for more humane treatment of asylum seekers, that we have a fair and just earned pathway to citizenship has had on Hispanic communities throughout. Let me be very clear that all of us, everybody on this screen, has shared experiences of racial injustice, shared experiences of discrimination, shared experiences of obstacles to healthcare that produce the conditions that we see where our communities are dying at an alarming higher rate. We're transmitting the virus at an alarming higher rate, especially to our family members. So all the provisions that we're fighting for are shared determination for social justice so that all of our communities, because it's not about Black, it's not about brown, it's not about Asian or Native American, all of our communities can have a decent shot to stay safe, to stay healthy, and to survive this pandemic together. And so we are in a collaborative coalition building mode to ensure that the Biden administration rescue plan is implemented in an equitable fashion, because all of us share the experience of this devastating pandemic, and all of us will share the experience of pursuing social justice as we build back better.
Well, I certainly hope we can make this a regular panel. Like I said, you all control a significant portion of lawmakers on Capitol Hill, and you certainly are a microcosm of what the country looks like. So it's been a delight having the chairs of the Tri-Caucus +2 here, and you all have a permanent invitation to come back anytime. So thank you so much, Congresswoman Judy Chu, Congresswoman Sharice Davids, Congresswoman Joyce Beatty, and Congressman Raul Ruiz.